restless dreams.
I see that town.
Silent Hill.
Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. But you never did. Well, I'm alone there now. In our special place. Waiting for you.
Silent Hill 2 is a masterpiece and everyone knows it. Consistently at the top of most publications' best horror games of all time, it should be no surprise that Konami wanted to revitalize the game and bring the haunting world of Silent Hill 2 into the modern gaming world. In a market oversaturated with remakes and reimaginings of some of the most important video games to ever come out, Blooper Team had a monstrous task ahead of themselves in remaking this beloved classic after over 23 years. The question on most people's minds is, did they succeed? This video will briefly break down the legacy of the original, talk about the remake, and then go in depth for a direct comparison between the two in order to highlight stylistic and tonal differences. This video assumes that you have played the remake, the original, or both, and as such there will be heavy spoilers. I will be talking through all the key gameplay and story beats from both the original and the remake and using that as a basis for my analysis. It's widely accepted that Silent Hill 2 is one of the greatest games ever made, a masterpiece of psychological horror. The game doesn't just aim to scare, it wants to draw players into its examination of grief and trauma and the psychological toll they take on the venerable cast of characters that the world presents. It creates a disturbing, melancholic world through the combination of story, gameplay, music, and sound design to craft one of the most realized narratives ever produced.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you.
It is not one of these elements that makes Silent Hill 2 the masterpiece it is, but rather the synthesis of these individually curated elements which create a uniquely haunting experience, one that beckons players into the oppressive environments and eerie fog of Silent Hill and holds them until the credits roll. The narrative follows James Sunderland, who is drawn to the town of Silent Hill by a mysterious letter from his late wife Mary, urging him to meet her at their special place.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary.
As James navigates the fog-shrouded town, he encounters characters who each grapple with their own dark pasts, reflecting aspects of James's own struggles and guilt. What sets the story apart is its focus on psychological depth and ambiguity. Details are revealed slowly, leaving much up to the player's interpretation. Now this journey wouldn't have the same weight it does without the run-ins with the game's supporting cast. First, there's Angela, who goes to Silent Hill in search for her mother, but it's revealed, both explicitly through the various cutscenes and also implicitly through the game's environmental design, that she was raped, manipulated, and abused as a young girl. This leads her to come back to Silent Hill to confront the trauma. We see her struggle with suicidal thoughts, culminating in her acceptance of the personal hell where her pain is all-consuming.
For me, it's always like this.
Eddie, who has been called to Silent Hill to face his demons after a lifetime of being bullied for his weight. While strikingly similar to Angela and James's journey, Eddie is unique in that he leans into it. He lets the hate consume him, which transforms him into a violent, paranoid man. His inability to escape this rage leads to a fatal confrontation with James.
I knew it! You too! You're just like him, James!
Laura, a young girl who had a deep connection with Mary while the two were in the same hospital. She is untouched by the horrors of Silent Hill, symbolizing the innocence that James has all but lost. She serves as a sort of guide to pull James along his path through Silent Hill, with his constant chasing of her character reflecting and mirroring James's desperate search for Mary. Her constant smart-aleck nature and the way she playfully teases James emphasizes the contrast between her simple hope and James's self-inflicted suffering.
Did I scare you?
Yeah, you did.
The final main character is Maria, who plays a pivotal role in James's quest to find answers and confront his sorrowed past. While she resembles Mary in appearance, Maria's sensual, confident, and flirtatious attitude contrasts the thoughtful and emotionally complex Mary, which we can only capture glimpses of throughout the story. Maria is an embodiment of James's repressed sexual desires and the way that he projects these into an idealized version of Mary. James's repeated attempts to save Maria, followed by her subsequent deaths throughout the game, reflect the cycle of guilt and punishment that James endures as he struggles to confront the truth about himself. The cast of Silent Hill 2 extends beyond the humans and also includes the monsters that populate the town, each representing facets of James's psyche and past. These enemies are more than just physical threats, they are symbolic manifestations of James's inner turmoil. The half-clothed nurses and mannequins are more primal representations of James's repressed sexual desires, which emerged during Mary's illness. Their disturbing appearances and movements serve as a reminder of the shame and frustration he feels about his longing for intimacy. Pyramid Head is the most iconic figure in Silent Hill 2. Embodying James's overwhelming guilt and desire for punishment, he relentlessly pursues James throughout the game, constantly pushing him to confront the truth about his actions. The design of these enemies, alongside their unsettling behaviors, add to the horror and psychological complexity. Each encounter with them isn't just a battle for survival, it's a confrontation with fragments of James's own mind, making the town of Silent Hill feel alive with his fears and regrets. James makes his way through a number of desolate and decrepit locations, ranging from a rundown apartment building and a creepy hospital, all the way to a prison buried deep beneath the town, and a labyrinth which mirrors James's own psychological confusion, before finally arriving at a long-abandoned hotel. As players reach the climax, they discover the grim reality that has been staring at them in the face for their entire journey. Mary isn't here. She's dead. James killed Mary, suffocating her to end his own suffering rather than hers. James must confront this truth if he has any hope of escaping his own mental prison.
I killed her.
Silent Hill 2's narrative is compelling not because of the clear resolutions, but because it leaves players questioning James's motivations, the nature of guilt, and the very purpose of his journey in the first place.
I was weak. That's why I needed you. Needed someone to punish me for my sins.
One of Silent Hill 2's most fascinating aspects is its multiple endings, each offering a different lens through which to view James's story. The endings are determined by subtle in-game behaviors, rewarding players who pay attention to their actions and choices. The Leave ending, often first obtained for most players, sees James coming to terms with his actions and moving forward. He rejects Maria's illusions and accepts Mary's death, leaving Silent Hill with Laura. This ending offers a sense of hope, suggesting that James has finally begun to forgive himself. In contrast, the Maria ending sees James clinging to this idealized version of Mary through Maria. James chooses to leave with her and rejects his need to move past his guilt and remorse over killing Mary. Instead, he accepts the substitute that Silent Hill presents. It concludes with the two walking to James's car. Maria can be heard coughing, and James is returned to his cold, dismissive demeanor when he says,
You'd better do something about that cough.
This signifies that James is destined to repeat the same cycle that brought him to Silent Hill in the first place. The In Water ending explores the darkest outcome. James succumbs to his grief and guilt, choosing to drown himself in the lake. The game subtly guides the players towards this ending if they show signs of giving up, like keeping James at low health or closely examining Angela's knife, which is symbolic of her suicidal thoughts.
Without you, Mary, I've got nothing.
Beyond these main endings, the game offers 3 additional ones accessible only after a first playthrough. The Rebirth ending suggests a more disturbing twist, as James gathers ritual items in an attempt to resurrect Mary, rowing her body to a nearby island. It implies that Mary's body was in his car throughout the entire game, adding a new layer of darkness to the narrative.
And they still grant power to those who venerate them. Power to defy even death.
The remaining 2 are joke endings. There's the dog ending, where Shiba Inu is revealed to have been controlling the events of the entire game, and there's the UFO ending, featuring James being abducted by aliens. While these are playful, they do serve as a reminder of the game's awareness of its own surreal and dreamlike quality. These varied endings give Silent Hill 2 a depth that invites multiple playthroughs. The game's story shifts based on player choices, allowing for different interpretations of James's actions and the town's meaning. The ambiguous nature of the endings keeps the players pondering the story long after finishing the game. To touch on music and sound design, Akira Yamaoka's work is integral to the atmosphere of Silent Hill 2. In the original, Yamaoka was credited for, quote, all music and sound effects, which highlights his critical role in just how good Silent Hill 2 is overall, considering it has some of the most haunting and ethereal sounds in all of gaming. The ambient, eerie tracks set a tone of isolation and unease, while the sounds of clanking pipes or distant wails keep players constantly on edge. The radio, which buzzes when enemies are near, adds another layer of tension, turning otherwise mundane moments into nerve-wracking experiences. At the same time, the game's use of silence can be just as effective, creating a sense of vast emptiness that deepens the player's feelings of loneliness and dread. Despite Silent Hill 2's dated tank controls, the gameplay still holds up, largely because the player's role in directing James through every step of his journey is vital to the game's immersion. One standout feature is the hybrid fixed camera, which follows James while also locking in place at times to highlight key environmental or narrative details. The cinematic quality balances player control with fixed camera angles, adding to the atmosphere. Though director Masashi Tsuboyama mentioned in a tweet that he wasn't fully satisfied with the camera limitations at the time due to hardware constraints, I personally think it enhances the overall experience. It adds a unique stylistic lens for later comparison with the remake. In terms of gameplay structure, Silent Hill 2 is more of a horror game than a strict survival horror title, as it provides the players with ample resources, enough ammo and health to engage with most enemies, even though many encounters can be avoided. However, the real joy comes from the map exploration and puzzle solving. The map updates in real time, with James marking blocked paths, locked doors, and other points of interest. This mechanic allows players to track progress through elimination, building a clear understanding of each area by continuously checking the map. The game's puzzles further enhance the gameplay. Silent Hill 2 stands out for just how little it holds the player's hands, providing cryptic clues and expecting players to work out solutions for themselves. Impressively, some puzzles are randomly generated with each playthrough, meaning players encounter fresh challenges even on multiple replays. The fact that Team Silent implemented this randomization in 2001 is a testament to the game's forward-thinking design, making the experience feel new and rewarding with each playthrough. I wanted to use the last 12 minutes or so to really set the stage for how good of a game Silent Hill 2 is. You need this context to properly even begin to look at Remake. I mean, fans of this game are really fucking fans of this game. And of those super fans who know every single detail there is to know about the original, only about 50% of them have actually played the game. This is all to say that Silent Hill 2 is one of those video games that would genuinely be scary to try to remake given the absolute love there is for the original. As the marketing cycle for the remake kept going, for some reason, it just got worse and worse, it felt like. I, along with most fans, wondered if Blooper Team had even the smallest grasp on why Silent Hill 2 was good in the first place. The first trailer started off on such an awful note by showing James in the mirror with no signs of any shadows underneath his eyes, just completely missing the point. The rest of the trailer wasn't bad, but you could kind of tell at this point that they'd missed kind of like the tonal mark that the original said. But it was still early. I mean, this was 2 years ago, so they were still cooking, right? But then we got the combat reveal trailer, and this was just 8 months before release. And that just set expectations back even further. I mean, it had the weird action-packed editing style, awkward fighting against large groups at a time, all combined with this awkwardly placed soundtrack, made Silent Hill 2 feel like some grungy action game. It did not look good. It even sparked a bit of news coverage as the Blooper Team president came out and said that it was Konami who was responsible for the marketing and that that trailer did not actually reflect the spirit of the game. Which, honestly, it just left everybody else even more confused. Did Konami botch another easy moneymaker? Or was it actually just a weird marketing trailer that didn't reflect the actual game but just wanted to appeal to a broader audience? Believe me, my money was on the former. Well, here we are. Silent Hill 2 Remake is out, and critics and fans are all eating a big old buffet of crow. After playing the game, it was clear that Blooper Team approached the project with immense respect for the original 2001 classic, and their goal was clearly to preserve what made Silent Hill 2 iconic while enhancing the experience for modern players. While the remake inevitably introduces changes, many of them successfully elevate the experience, making it unique and a haunting game for newcomers, while also remaining a satisfying return for longtime fans. Let's get into some of these changes at a high level. One of the most immediate and striking aspects of the remake is its visual fidelity. Blooper Team has masterfully updated the look of Silent Hill, making environments richer and more immersive. This once foggy, obscure world is now presented with greater clarity and detail, drawing players deeper into the haunting streets and decaying interiors of the town. James's character model, for example, showcases subtleties like his tired eyes or dirty hands, which visually reflect the emotional and physical toll of his journey. These small touches contribute to the immersion, helping players feel the weight of James's struggles in a way that's more immediate and tangible than the original. That said, while the visual upgrade enhances immersion, some of the surreal, dreamlike atmosphere from the original is slightly diminished. The original Silent Hill 2 leaned into its technical limitations, using the fog and indistinct visuals to blur the lines between reality and nightmare. The remake's crisp, clear environments, though beautifully rendered, sometimes make Silent Hill feel more grounded and less like the shifting, nightmarish space it once was. This is less of a flaw and more of a natural consequence of modern technology. It's simply a different, more refined interpretation of the town's unsettling beauty. The remake's character animations are another area where Blooper Team's modern technology shines. Facial animations are more nuanced and expressive, especially in key emotional moments. James's realization that Maria isn't his wife, Mary, is now packed with more subtlety and emotional complexity, conveyed not just through dialogue, but through his expressions and body language. These improvements add emotional depth to the story, helping players connect with the characters on a more visceral level.
I'm sorry. I know you tried.
The performance of Luke Roberts as James stands out, as he delivers a portrayal filled with vulnerability, capturing James's inner turmoil as he grapples with guilt and grief. However, while these more human performances make the characters feel more relatable, they also lose some of the strange, disjointed quality that defined the original. In the 2001 version, the stilted dialogue delivery and the awkward animations gave the characters an eerie, almost alien presence, which contributed to the game's psychological horror.
What's this? Not very cute, is it? Here, James. You take it.
Thanks.
The remake smooths out both of these rough edges, making characters more natural, which is an improvement in many respects, but it does still slightly soften the unsettling tone that was so crucial to the original experience. One area where the remake unquestionably excels is in its sound design. Akira Yamaoka's return to score the remake is a triumph, and his updated compositions beautifully balance nostalgia and innovation. The music is haunting and melancholic, perfectly complementing the game's eerie environments. Yamaoka's score, combined with revamped sound effects, deepen the player's immersion in Silent Hill. The crackling of James's radio, the distant groans of unseen creatures, and the ambient noises of the decaying town all contribute to a richly atmospheric experience. The sound design, best experienced with headphones, adds an essential layer of tension and dread. Where the original sound had a raw, lo-fi quality that heightened its unsettling atmosphere, the remake's audio is more refined but no less impactful. In fact, the crispness of the sound enhances certain aspects of the horror, making even the smallest noises stand out. Whether it's the soft shuffle of footsteps or the sudden blare of static, every sound in the remake feels intentional, heightening the tension without overwhelming the player. Combat is one of the areas where the remake significantly deviates from the original, and opinions on this change may vary depending on personal preference. The original Silent Hill 2 was often criticized for its clunky combat mechanics. James's attacks felt slow and imprecise, contributing to a sense of vulnerability that aligned with the game's oppressive atmosphere. In the remake, Blooper Team has completely overhauled the combat system, making it smoother, more dynamic, and ultimately more enjoyable to play. Players can now dodge enemy attacks using iframes and target specific body parts with guns to add a unique layer of strategy to both melee and ranged combat. Real quick editor's note, the downside of this give-and-take melee system is that the game does not do a necessarily good job of handling multiple enemies at once. Sometimes what you might want to be hitting gets overridden by what the game has decided it will snap onto. This is heightened by the fact that the game also accounts for downed enemies in this equation. What's funny is that this could also happen when you kill an enemy too close to a cabinet or a car window. I think this clip speaks for itself. The enemy here is dead and has been dead for a moment, and all I want to do is try to break the cabinet to get the item, but the game keeps snapping on to the dead enemy. While the revamped combat mechanics make battles more engaging and responsive, they also shift the tone slightly. In the original, the awkward combat made players feel ill-equipped to handle the horrors they encountered, amplifying the tension. The remake's smoother controls make players feel more capable, which reduces some of the original's feelings of helplessness. Additionally, the increased emphasis on combat in the remake means more frequent enemy encounters, which can occasionally disrupt the slow, creepy dread that was so central to the original game. While the improved mechanics are undeniably welcome from a gameplay perspective, some may miss the raw, uncomfortable tension that came with the original's more cumbersome combat. Exploration in the remake is one of its strongest aspects, with more intricate environments that invite players to comb through every room, drawer, and corner of Silent Hill. The town feels larger and more detailed, encouraging thorough searches for items, notes, and clues. The addition of hidden objects behind breakable barriers or inside drawers adds an element of discovery that wasn't as prominent in the original. This added depth enhances the overall sense of immersion, making the town feel more like a real lived-in place that players can interact with on a deeper level. However, this increased emphasis on item discovery and environmental interaction slightly changes the nature of exploration. In the original, rooms often felt more abstract and symbolic, contributing to the game's dreamlike atmosphere. The remake's more interactive spaces make Silent Hill feel more grounded in reality, which, while immersive, sometimes detracts from the surreal psychological horror that defined the original game's environments. That said, for players who enjoy a more hands-on approach to exploration, the remake offers a richer, more engaging experience. Another one of the most notable differences between the original and the remake is the length of the game. The original Silent Hill 2 could be completed in about 8 hours on a first playthrough, whereas the remake stretches to around 14 to 18 hours. This longer runtime is largely due to the expanded environments and added content such as new puzzles and world-building details that weren't present in the original. The additional time spent exploring and solving puzzles adds depth to the world and allows players to immerse themselves more fully in the horrors of Silent Hill. However, while the added content enriches the experience, it can sometimes affect the pacing. The original's shorter runtime meant that the tension rarely let up, with each new location and puzzle flowing naturally into the next. In the remake, certain sections can feel drawn out, with more time spent exploring or backtracking through areas that, while atmospheric, don't always move the story forward. For instance, in the original, it took about 11 minutes to reach the apartment complex, while in the remake, this same journey can take 2 to 3 hours. This extended playtime, while offering more to see and do, can sometimes dilute the game's overall intensity. That said, for many players, this added length will be a welcome opportunity to spend more time in the haunting world of Silent Hill. The expanded exploration allows for a deeper connection to the story and environment, and the slower pace gives players more time to soak in the atmosphere. While the remake's pacing is different from the original, it offers its own rewards by giving players more time to uncover the mysteries of the town. Ultimately, Silent Hill 2 Remake is an impressive achievement. Blooper Team has successfully recreated much of what made the original game so iconic while modernizing key elements to appeal to contemporary audiences. The visual upgrades, improved sound design, and enhanced character animations all contribute to an experience that both feels familiar and new. The expanded exploration and smoother combat mechanics offer a more dynamic and engaging experience without losing sight of the psychological horror that defines Silent Hill 2. So while the remake does make some concessions, sacrificing a bit of the original's surreal atmosphere in favor of more realism and extending the game's length in ways that can affect pacing, these changes are largely positive for modern players. The remake is a phenomenal game in its own right, and while it may not completely capture every single aspect of the original's haunting magic, it brings Silent Hill 2 into the present with a level of care and respect that longtime fans will appreciate. Whether you're new to the series or you're revisiting an old favorite, Silent Hill 2 Remake stands as a testament to the enduring power of this iconic horror masterpiece. With that being said, let's go ahead and go level by level, cutscene by cutscene, and compare the remake with the original. I don't want to cherry pick big differences, but rather I want to explore the two in their entirety so that we all have the proper context when measuring these two against each other. This section will be the bulk of the video because I want to show some of these cutscenes to demonstrate some of my thoughts about how they compare. Feel free to skip through them if you'd rather just like to hear my thoughts, but I do think it'll be helpful to watch them as I play them. Now let's go ahead and get right started with the intro cutscene. The intro in the bathroom is one of the most iconic scenes, especially for horror fans. It captures James's uncertain and dark feelings about returning to Silent Hill.
Mary, could you really be in this town?
In the original, the shadow under his eyes form an almost emotionless void, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The haunting soundtrack complements the moment as he touches his face, making it a beautifully directed scene. However, the sharp inhale and grunted exhale that follows slightly undercut the tone for me. In the remake, the scene is almost identical, but Blooper Team introduces some tonal shifts already. The sounds of the sink is heard before anything else appears on screen, followed by a top-down view of James's hand, transitioning to white noise. This sets up a more grounded narrative, focusing on James's personal journey. The music only begins when James stares himself in the mirror, a subtle difference from the original which adds emphasis to James's introspection. The extended look at his zombie-like movement suggests he's wandering into Silent Hill without much intent. In the original, James asks,
Mary, could you really be in this town?
while looking in the mirror, a powerful moment. The remake delivers the line over a black screen, which weakens its impact.
Mary. Could you really be in this town?
For me, seeing James say it in the original makes it much more engaging. Blooper Team seems to favor this more detached style, reflecting the remake's shift in tone. James then goes outside where we hear the opening monologue. Both versions include Mary's intro monologue reading the letter. While the voice acting in the remake is strong, the original's pacing and intensity felt more visceral.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now.
The original holds a wide shot of James staring out at the lake with his car in the foreground, while the remake shifts to a side shot when James speaks, signaling a more personal focus on his character in the remake. We pick up the map from the car and head to the graveyard. In the original, James's comment about the save points being like somebody groping around in his skull was text-based, allowing the player's imagination to amplify the horror. In the remake, this line is spoken, but the delivery feels less intense, making the original's subtle approach more effective for me.
It's like someone's groping around my skull.
The graveyard scene with Angela is where the remake introduces more traditional shot-reverse shot editing, focusing on facial expressions with enhanced detail. Angela's portrayal is ominous and the voice acting is solid.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry. I was just...
Hey, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
Yeah, I'm looking for Silent Hill. Is this the right way?
Yeah. It's hard to see with this fog, but there's only the one road. You can't miss it.
Thanks.
But... I think you should stay away. This town, there's something wrong with it. And it's not just the fog, either.
Is it dangerous?
Maybe. It's kind of hard to explain, but...
I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
No, I believe you. It's just... I guess I don't really care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going either way.
But why?
I'm looking for... someone.
Excuse me,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
was
it's
just...
okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
Yeah. I'm looking for Silent Hill. Is this the right way?
Yeah. It's hard to see with this fog, but there's only the one road. You can't miss it.
Thanks.
But
Yes?
I think you'd better stay away. This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Is it dangerous?
maybe. And it's not just the fog either.
Okay,
It's...
I got it. I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
No, I believe you. It's just... I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going to town either way.
But why?
I'm looking for... someone.
I do miss the original's camera work, like the frequent use of the Dutch angles that heighten the eerie and disorienting atmosphere. In the remake, a minor nitpick is James's omission of the word town in his line,
I'm going to town either way.
from the original.
I'm going either way.
This small detail reinforced the connection to the town, giving his decision more weight. The camera movements in the original, which kept characters in frame while shifting perspectives, are more restrained in the remake, which leans heavily on jump cuts.
Thanks.
But
One thing you'll also notice in the original is the transition between the FMV parts of the cutscene and those that take place in-engine. These transitions are present throughout the entire game, and I kind of wish they would have stuck with one approach. However, I imagine the FMVs were a bit more costly to produce, so it makes sense that they did it this way. But it is funny that in some instances, the FMV portions of the cutscenes can be as short as a few seconds before the transition to the in-game cutscenes. Either way, it doesn't make a huge difference, but I did want to call it out. As we move into town, the remake lengthens this section a bit. It adds moments like entering a car repair shop to find a key for the gate, which serves as a gameplay tutorial to teach players to search their environment. I like that this aligns with the remake's focus on exploration, although it feels more instructional than atmospheric. The player begins to explore the foggy streets of Silent Hill. In the original, the design of the town is fairly linear, with most streets blocked off by debris or mysterious obstructions. The streets feel vast, but largely desolate, reinforcing a sense of isolation. The exploration is brief, as the player quickly stumbles upon the trail of blood that leads them to the construction area, where they encounter the first enemy and collect the plank and radio. What makes this moment stand out in the original is how the player sees the enemy in the frame before James notices it. The slow build-up, where the enemy rises as James struggles with the radio, adds a layer of tension that's not relying on jump scares. In contrast, the remake expands this sequence significantly, offering a more drawn-out exploration of the town before James even encounters the first enemy. Rather than picking up the map from his car as in the original, the remake places the town map near Sanders Street, which already signals to the player that exploration will be more central to the experience. Instead of finding the first blood trail on the streets, James finds it in the garden shop, which was inaccessible in the original. He follows the blood trail and ventures through backyards and alleyways, eventually catching a brief glimpse of the first enemy as he progresses, which heightens the tension.
Hello?
This shift in location further emphasizes the remake's focus on suspenseful build-ups. On our way into town, we did see the game's first flashback sequence showing the construction site from the original. I like these brief homages to the original, and I also like how it reinforces a popular theory that this is not James's first time going through the town in search of Mary. After the first enemy is defeated, we still get the iconic moment when Mary's voice speaks through the radio. While the original leaves this as an unsettling audio cue, the remake adds a more expressive touch, showing James's puzzled look as he listens to the strange broadcast. This small detail underscores the remake's tendency to focus more heavily on James's reactions and personal journey, contrasting with the original's more detached presentation. Where the remake really diverges is in its handling of the exploration and puzzles. Instead of moving quickly to the next objective, the remake introduces a puzzle in the form of a jukebox in the bar. Here, James must fix the jukebox to play a particular song, which leads to unlocking the back alley and subsequently finding the apartment's key. This puzzle is entirely absent in the original, where the player finds the apartment key on a body and proceeds. The inclusion of this puzzle slows down the pacing but adds depth to the exploration, encouraging players to interact with their surroundings and uncover small environmental details. The remake emphasizes this exploration as part of its overall game design, with the intention of immersing players more deeply into Silent Hill's atmosphere. This section is now stretched out in the remake, with James needing to visit a small apartment building, a diner, and a record store in order to obtain the pieces he needs to solve the jukebox puzzle. This design is more player involved compared to the original straightforward exploration, where key items are found with minimal deviation from the path. In addition, the remake also adds quite a bit of optional exploration-focused side content here, such as the addition of the keypad puzzle. Here, players find a note indicating that someone attempted to brute force a code to the store's keypad, leaving clues that guide them to carry on the previous attempts before they eventually land on the right solution of 4044. The remake rewards this careful exploration by providing health and ammo early in the game for those who take the time to solve the puzzle. With the puzzle items found, James then proceeds to the bar to play the song.
Park on the lake. We spent the whole day there. Just the two of us staring at the water.
You'll notice here that this is where James's memory is triggered about Rosewater Park and the potential for Mary being there. In the original, this detail was suggested in James's opening monologue, but I like its inclusion here. Not only does it flesh out James's emotional reaction to the song and sudden memory about the park's significance, it also takes place later to bring the overall objectives closer in time, making it more digestible. Hearing the song and finding the key the jukebox spits out allows James to traverse through the bar and head into the back alleys where he finds the apartment key. I like this moment because the second you pick up the key, you are immediately put on notice of enemies nearby, which heightens tension as their appearance is triggered when the player is briefly helpless. The player is unlikely able to take on 3 enemies at once here, so it subtly guides the players towards avoiding them. This prompts James's reappearance back onto the street, where we can see the fog has intensified, showcasing the debris flying through the wind and the almost destructive impact on the town's streetlights. It's an awesome detail. Overall, the town's exploration in the remake is far more fleshed out. By adding puzzles, backtracking, and lengthier environments to traverse, the game allows for a slower pace and deeper engagement with the world. This extended exploration contrasts with the original's more streamlined approach, which conveyed isolation through simplicity and restraint. Both versions effectively capture the eerie desolation of Silent Hill, but the remake offers a richer experience by giving the player more to interact with and discover along the way, albeit at the cost of the more concisely paced original design. With that being said, we are now at the apartments. Now that we are in the apartments, in the remake you'll immediately encounter the desk puzzle behind the reception area, guiding your objective right from the start. In the original, the coin desk puzzle doesn't appear until much later, after you've solved the clock puzzle and are nearly done with the apartments. This earlier introduction to the puzzle in the remake adds structure to your exploration, subtly guiding players through the apartments with a clear short-term goal. Both games introduce the flashlight early on, and in each version it becomes essential for navigating the dimly lit corridors. In the original, the flashlight scene is particularly cinematic, using a fixed camera angle that obscures the enemy until James picks up the light, creating a tense, dramatic reveal. This technique heightens the dread as the enemy is cleverly hidden. The remake, with its over-the-shoulder perspective, can't replicate this exact effect, but compensates by hiding enemies in more obvious places, such as mannequins lurking around corners, forcing players to stay alert. Another small but important difference is that in the original, James couldn't view his map until he found the flashlight, creating a greater sense of urgency in searching for a light source. In the remake, you can still view the map in the dark, making the search for the flashlight slightly less urgent. This subtle change impacts the tension of exploration, as the map was critical for navigation in the original and in the remake. Moving through the apartments, we reach the memorable scene where Laura kicks away the key James is reaching for through the bars.
Ow!
Ha ha.
Hey, wait! Damn it.
Hey! Wait! Damn it.
Both versions portray this scene similarly, but the delivery differs. In the original, James's line,
Hey, wait! Damn it.
feels awkwardly timed, almost comedic in its stiffness. In contrast, the remake presents this line more naturally, adding a level of realism to the scene,
Damn it.
even though it sacrifices some of the unintentionally humorous charm of the original. The first appearance of Pyramid Head is another pivotal moment. In the original, players first see him through metal bars at the end of a long hallway with no cutscene, just raw, in-game tension as Pyramid Head stands there, unmoving and ominous. This introduction creates a sense of dread as players are forced to confront him within the natural flow of the game. The remake keeps this scene but shortens the hallway, reducing the impact of the moment just slightly. Although still effective, the framing in the original heightens the fear by making Pyramid Head seem even more distant and menacing. You enter a couple rooms and come back and have the same figure appear in front of the TV screen. The developers of the original note that this figure is James's model, which I always thought was a nice touch, especially considering the TV and the VHS from later on in the game at the hotel. What's notable is that in the remake, the body here is covered up with a blanket, but you could still pick up on similar hints that it is James by looking at the pants and the boots. We then come to our first introduction to Eddie, and already the difference in tone between the two versions is stark.
It wasn't me. I didn't do it.
Do what?
I didn't do anything. I swear. He was like this when I got here.
My name's James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
Eddie. Who's that dead guy in the kitchen?
I didn't do it. I swear I didn't kill anybody.
You're not friends with that red pyramid thing, are you?
Red pyramid thing? I don't know what you're talking about. Honest. But I did see some weird looking monsters. They scared the hell out of me, so I ran in here.
Well, I guess this place isn't too safe either. What happened here anyway?
I told you, I don't know. I'm not even from this town. I just...
You too, huh? Something just brought you here, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
Well, whatever it is, I think you better get out of here soon.
Yeah, you're right. about you?
I'll leave as soon as I'm done here. Eddie, be careful.
James, you be careful too.
The original presents Eddie's introduction as awkward and disjointed. His reactions feel stilted and the dialogue doesn't flow naturally. This works to create a surreal, dreamlike quality, but it also is less believable. In the remake, Eddie is more reactive and defensive, immediately suspicious of James. The natural flow of the conversation, where Eddie even suggests that they escape together, makes the remake Eddie more relatable and nuanced. However, the remake omits a key line from the original where James asks Eddie if he's friends with the Red Pyramid thing. This moment in the original subtly establishes that the town manifests differently to each character, a detail that's missed in the remake for this cutscene. Also, you'll notice here that Blooper Team uses the Dutch camera angle a bit more. This angle was used quite a lot in the original, so I'm glad Blooper decided to keep it at times, although the camera rotation speed is slower, making its use more subtle and less dreamlike.
Hey, who's there?
It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I didn't do it, I swear.
Hey, are you okay?
I didn't do anything. He was like that when I got here.
He? Oh, you mean the man back there? In the kitchen?
I didn't do it. I swear I didn't kill him.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm not saying that you did. Look, my name is James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
Eddie, okay. So, do you live here, Eddie?
No. I'm not even from this town. It's just...
Something brought you here.
Yeah, you could say that. Well, they came at me. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I came here. Figured it might be safe, but then I found the guy in the fridge.
Easy, deep breaths. Look, this place, it's not safe. These things, this whole town, there's something wrong with it. Might be best if you just get out of here.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, you want to come with? Maybe together we can find a way out of this town.
Oh, sorry, but I can't leave. Not yet. I need to find someone.
Oh.
And, Eddie, be careful.
Yeah, you too.
In the remake, we take this time to solve the coin puzzle. The coin puzzle stood out to me as one of the most significant differences in puzzle design between the original and the remake. In the original, solving it was straightforward. You just place the right coins in the correct slots after reading one clue. In the remake, however, the puzzle has been expanded with multiple riddles and two-sided coins, adding complexity and more possible combinations. While I appreciate it's still not particularly difficult, I appreciated that it wasn't a simple one-and-done scenario. What makes it even more interesting is how the puzzle develops a mini-narrative, with each clue revealing more about a woman fleeing from a dangerous man. The final twist asks you to place the guilty coin on the top slot, but as far as I can tell, there's no definitive right answer. Though it doesn't seem to affect the game's outcome, this puzzle blends the narrative and gameplay more seamlessly, which is exactly what I had hoped for in the remake. We then come to the iconic scene with Pyramid Head. Of note is that this happens much earlier in the original and is more tied to exploration than it is a sharp progression path as it is in the remake. The closet scene with Pyramid Head is played out similarly in both versions, but with key differences in pacing. In the original, the entire scene unfolds from within the confines of the closet, creating an intense, claustrophobic feel as James watches Pyramid Head's disturbing actions through the slats. The remake introduces more jump cuts, shifting between shots inside and outside the closet, which, while more dynamic, reduces the sense of entrapment that the original conveys. Additionally, in the remake, James fires only 3 timed shots from his handgun, whereas in the original he empties 8 rounds in quick succession. This change adds a more deliberate pace to the scene in the remake, where James seems more cautious and less frantic. As the apartments transition into the otherworld, the original subtly blends reality and nightmare. There's no clear indication of when James has crossed into the otherworld, creating an eerie ambiguity. The line between the two realms is intentionally blurred. In the remake, this transition is far more obvious. After following Pyramid Head through a door, the visuals change dramatically, with grotesque, twisted architecture signaling the shift. This makes the remake's version of the otherworld more defined, but also loses some of the mystery that the original's approach cultivated. You continue on until you find the clock puzzle, which is more exploration focused. You need to find the separate hands to the puzzle and align the right time the moment you get a piece, as each correct hand on the clock will unlock the next section to explore, where you'll find the remaining hands. What I like in the remake is that you can see all the clocks in the game are set to the exact same time, 9, 10, and 15 seconds. This can be a subtle hint at the solution of the puzzle, but you don't really need to look at it all that hard to find it. I also view this as the time that James killed Mary, but that's just my own personal theory. We are now at our second scene with Angela. The Angela mirror room is another key scene that differs in tone. In both versions, Angela's trauma is on full display, but the remake enhances the visual storytelling by reflecting her face in the knife she holds, symbolizing her inner struggle.
James.
This added layer of visual symbolism is a powerful touch.
Angela. Okay. Look, I'm not sure what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Yeah, I'm James.
Angela.
Angela, okay. I don't know what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Really? What's the point? It's easier just to run. Maybe it's all we deserve.
We?
Me. You. We're all the same.
I'm not like you.
Really? But you're the same as me. It's easier just to run. Besides, is what we deserve.
No, I'm not like you.
Are you afraid? Sorry.
It's okay. Did you find your mother?
No. Not yet.
Did she live here? In this building?
I don't know.
So all you know is that she lived in this town?
What did you say? How did you know that?
Well, I just figured because this is where you're looking for her. How else would I know?
Yeah.
Are you afraid? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Did you find your mother?
Not yet. She's not anywhere.
Did she live in this apartment building?
I don't know.
So, all you know is she lived in this town.
What did you say? How do you know that?
Well, I just figured, 'cause this is where you're looking for her. How else would I know?
Yeah.
Sorry. Did you find the person that you were looking for?
Not yet. Her name's Mary. She's my wife.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I don't know why I think she's here.
Am I right?
I'm so tired.
So, why did you come to this town anyway?
I'm sorry. Did you find the person you're looking for?
Not yet. Her name's Mary. She's my wife.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
She died 3 years ago.
She's dead?
Oh, don't worry, I'm not crazy. At least I don't think so.
We have to find my mama.
Should I go with you?
This town really is dangerous. Now I know what you meant back there in the cemetery.
Anyway, she's dead. I don't know why I think she's here.
She's dead?
Don't worry. I'm not crazy. At least, I don't think so.
I've got to find my mama.
Should I go with you? This town's dangerous. Now I know what you meant back there in the cemetery.
No, it's okay. Besides, I'd just slow you down.
What about that?
Will you hold it for me?
Sure. No problem.
If I kept it, I'm not sure what I might do. No! I'm sorry! I've been bad! Please don't!
I'll be okay by myself. Besides, I'd just slow you down.
What about that?
Will you hold it for me?
Sure. No problem.
If I kept it, I'm not sure what I might do. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been bad. Please, don't!
The Angela cutscene in the mirror plays out differently in the remake, reflecting her emotional state more subtly compared to the original. In the remake, Angela's demeanor is much more subdued, as if she's completely worn down by her trauma. Her reactions are slower and less volatile, which gives the sense that she's deeply depressed and emotionally drained. This softer presentation reflects Angela's detachment from reality, as if she's in a constant state of melancholy, barely engaging with James and the world around her. The way she speaks, combined with her distant gaze, gives the impression that Angela is lost within her own pain, and her interactions with James are more muted and resigned. By contrast, in the original, Angela's behavior is more erratic, as if she's phasing in and out of the conversation. There are moments when she seems somewhat engaged with James, only to quickly withdraw into herself, contributing to the scene's surreal atmosphere. Her unpredictable shifts in tone and focus make it seem like she's mentally drifting between realities, giving the player the sense that Angela is unstable and not fully present. This phasing in and out behavior is part of what made the original scene so dreamlike and unsettling. Angela felt less grounded, and her sudden changes in mood added to the overall eerie, disjointed presentation of the game's characters. This contrast highlights how the remake chooses to emphasize Angela's depression, while the original plays on the more surreal, almost otherworldly nature of her character. Moving beyond the cutscene, the remake introduces entirely new gameplay elements in the otherworld apartments as you progress to complete the clock puzzle. One notable addition is the moth puzzle, which requires players to count the number of eyes, skulls, and moons on various moths to solve a math puzzle. This puzzle adds an extra layer of complexity to the apartment section that wasn't present in the original, which focused more on traditional exploration and environmental puzzles. This addition is a good example of how the remake seeks to engage players more with the environment. Finally, we have arrived at the first boss fight with Pyramid Head. In the original, the fight is simple but effective. Players shoot Pyramid Head while dodging his massive blade, all within the confines of a small, claustrophobic room. The tension comes from the limited space, as Pyramid Head's swing covers most of the room, forcing players to react quickly. The remake expands on this fight, making it feel more dynamic. Pyramid Head's attacks are more telegraphed, giving players opportunity to dodge and then counterattack in a way that feels more interactive. The fluid combat of the remake adds depth to the fight, though the sense of desperation that the small room in the original created is somewhat lost in the process. Both versions end the fight with the same eerie siren signaling Pyramid Head's retreat. We then leave the apartments and go back out to the street, where we encounter Laura again. This scene is handled similarly in both versions, though the remake adds subtle camera changes and a bit of extra music to emphasize Laura's importance. James's comment about Laura's parents is a great addition in the remake, where Laura's subtle reaction, clutching the letter closer to her chest, foreshadows a later detail that was omitted in the remake. In the original, when you get the letter from Laura at the hotel, Mary tells Laura she wanted to adopt Laura. While that part of the letter is absent in the remake, this scene helps convey a similar tone with more subtle references to Laura being an orphan.
Maybe I did.
What's a little girl like you doing here anyway?
I don't know. What's a big dum-dum like you doing here anyway?
Hey, that's not very nice. Didn't your parents teach you any manners?
We then walk to Rosewater Park to meet Maria, and this is where the remake introduces one of its major character shifts. In the original, when you meet Maria, she comes across as dismissive and condescending.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
Maria's dialogue has a biting edge, and her attitude towards James is almost mocking, particularly in the line,
"And that's here?"
Her tone reinforces her role as a mysterious figure who might be manipulating James. In the remake, however, Maria is portrayed with a much softer, more empathetic demeanor.
"And that's here?"
Her question about the special place is delivered with genuine curiosity rather than disdain. This change affects the dynamic between Maria and James throughout the remake. Maria is more nurturing, and her flirtations with James are more subtle. For example, in the original, Maria grabs James's hand and places it on her chest to show him how warm she is, a gesture that is both forward and suggestive. In the remake, Maria touches James's face instead, a gentler form of flirtation that feels more in line with her softer portrayal. The remake also removes Maria's questioning of James's love for Mary, which in the original served as a way for Maria to undermine James and assert her own presence.
Or maybe you hated her.
This removal makes Maria seem less antagonistic and more supportive, changing the tone of their relationship. The remake adds more warmth to Maria's interactions with James, which could be seen as a way to further draw him in, though it reduces some of the tension present in the original's portrayal. One of the biggest narrative changes comes at the end of the scene, where in the original, James is the one who mentions heading toward Lakeview Hotel. He remembers it as a place where he and Mary shared happy memories, and he takes the lead in heading there. Maria follows, asking to come along so she won't be alone. In the remake, this dynamic is flipped. Maria suggests that she knows a different special place that Mary could have met, taking the lead and guiding James toward their next destination. This change shifts the player's agency away from James, as Maria essentially becomes the one guiding the journey at this point. The change also alters Maria's role from a follower to a more active participant, perhaps even a manipulator in James's quest. As the two make their way through the streets again, the remake further develops their relationship by including additional dialogue and gameplay elements. Maria plays a more active role during this segment, occasionally alerting James to nearby enemies or engaging in brief conversations that weren't present in the original, such as the callback to the Born from a Wish sub-scenario in the original. These additions flesh out their dynamic and give Maria more presence in the story, but they also stretch out the pacing. Maria takes James through a hotel where she makes a reference to her 2001 outfit, and James has the opportunity to comment on whether it would look good on Maria.
Hey, you think I'd look good in this one?
Sure.
A good addition and another way that the remake fleshes out the relationship between the two, which may be important for the Maria ending later on. Now in the original, this is where you head to the bowling alley. Maria waits outside while James enters and encounters Eddie and Laura. Maria's decision to wait outside always carried a sense of mystery. It's as if she knows something that James doesn't. However, in the remake, Maria follows James inside the bowling alley because Eddie and Laura aren't there. This change adds more dialogue between James and Maria, where James asks Maria if she would prefer to wait outside. Maria's response, questioning why James would even suggest that, is an odd moment that feels like a nod to returning players. It's as if the game is acknowledging the original scene, but playing with player expectations. It could also be a nod to James already expecting Maria's answer here, giving more credence to the theory that James had done this journey before. Since Maria doesn't stay outside in the remake, players miss out on one of the original's most iconic lines.
I'll wait here. I hate bowling.
I didn't come here to play, you know.
Which added a brilliant moment of humor. The remake includes a reference to eating pizza, but the humor doesn't land as effectively as it does in the original. In the original, this is where we chase Laura to an alley behind Heaven's Night, and Maria takes the two inside. In the remake, however, the two progress until they encounter a large hole in the street, forcing them to find a way around. This prompts another fog storm, and the two retreat to a nearby alley. This is where James loses the plank, using it to lock the path behind them, but quickly finds a steel pipe to replace it. In the original, players can randomly find the steel pipe at the gas station by the bowling alley. Players would keep both the plank and the pipe in the original, but I like how the remake makes this transition more seamless. They then are confronted with a swarm of monsters amidst the raging of the fog. They must fight and dodge their way through until they get to the alley behind Heaven's Night. I like this addition in the remake as it adds more tension to the Maria escort section. In the original, I never got the same tension because the streets were wide enough, which made avoiding enemies easier until I found my next path. The two then end up at Heaven's Night, a club that Maria seems intimately familiar with. In the original, Maria's association with Heaven's Night is only implied through her possession of the key. The player had to draw their own conclusions by observing the environment. However, in the remake, it's made much more explicit. Maria unlocks the door, knows where the lights are, and is clearly comfortable in this setting. This more direct approach to storytelling aligns with the remake's overall design, which often clarifies things that the original left more ambiguous. The remake also introduces an entirely new cutscene in Heaven's Night. Maria pours James a drink and flirts with him before she backs off when he pushes against her advances.
What are you doing?
Something to take the edge off.
There's a great shot here where James stares at the drink longingly, and it's clear it's taking everything in James not to pick it up and drink. James's drinking struggles were more subtle in the original, where the player could find a bottle of booze and receive some in-text dialogue from James. In the remake, this is simply conveyed through the sharpened facial expression of James, making it a more powerful scene. There's a great visual moment where James sees a poster of a dancer and asks Maria if it's her, and Maria just says,
"Is that you?"
Would you like it to be?
This scene subtly reinforces the idea that Maria is trying to become whatever James wants, which ties into her larger role in the story. The remake makes it clearer that Maria is actively trying to pull James away from his mission to find Mary. In the original, the walk to the hospital is straightforward. You leave Heaven's Night and simply follow the streets, eventually spotting Laura running into the hospital. In the remake, this is where Maria leads James to a new garden area, where Maria tells a story about a woman who lit a candle every night for her lover. This obvious metaphor to James's journey is interesting as a difference to the original, but it also feels like unnecessary padding that slows down the pacing of the story. James's expression during the cutscene perfectly captures what many fans of the original might be thinking at this point.
She's not here. And why would she be? I don't even remember this place.
While the story is meant to add depth, it doesn't feel necessary for the plot, and it feels like it's just being made for the sake of being different. Then, the two end up at the theater, which serves as the remake's version of the bowling alley, with Eddie and Laura inside. The change to a more intimate setting like the theater works well, providing a new area to explore and a fresh environment for the conversation between Eddie and Laura. However, I do feel like Maria not coming in is completely different in the remake. In the original, it's much more mysterious why she stays outside. In the remake, James has to crawl over broken glass in a window, which removes some of Maria's decision-making in not entering. We also hear Laura and Eddie talk through a hole in the wall, which is more diegetic than in the original, where in the bowling alley, we see them while James is still in the lobby. Laura still taunts Eddie about the monsters he sees, reinforcing that Laura's perception of Silent Hill differs from the other characters. We then come to the scene with Eddie and James. In the remake, this scene is much more fleshed out than in the original.
Eddie?
Oh. You're,
James. We met back at the apartment building.
Yeah, I remember.
I see that you didn't make it out yet.
Yeah. I just didn't get around to it yet.
Well, at least you got your appetite back. Are you alone here, Eddie?
In the original, Eddie is sitting eating pizza, which prompts James's famous line,
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
which is one of the most iconic lines in the game, albeit for weird comedic purposes. The remake replaces the pizza with a giant tub of ice cream, which Eddie scoops out of his hands in an unsettling, mindless way. This change heightens Eddie's creepiness while still retaining some dark humor. James's line is also adjusted to,
At least you got your appetite back.
which is more subtle, but it carries an underlying bite. This change makes Eddie's later hostility toward James more believable, as it feels like another dig at Eddie's weight, fueling his resentment. I love this scene, and its tonal shift is perhaps my favorite in the whole remake. The remake took an otherwise forgetful scene in the original and used the opportunity to further develop Eddie's fragile psyche, setting up his eventual breakdown in a more coherent way. The subtle shift in how Eddie reacts to James's comment is a great example of how the remake deepens character motivations while maintaining the core of the original scene. We then chase Laura through the theater and back out onto the streets. We then follow her to the hospital. The hospital is a critical section in Silent Hill 2's journey. As is the case with every section, the remake stretches this portion out considerably, adding more puzzles and combat to extend the gameplay. In the original, the hospital is more atmospheric, focusing on the eerie ambience and straightforward puzzles, allowing players to move through the section more quickly. I have to say, the hospital in the remake is absolutely stunning. The reception area, bathed in the soft dusk light, feel alive with the passage of time, something the original didn't quite capture. It adds an atmospheric layer that deepens the game's immersive quality. Both the original and the remake share the same key moments, such as finding the hair strand, medical tube in the remake, the drain puzzle, the chain box, and the ring puzzle. However, the remake introduces new puzzles around almost every corner in the hospital. The hospital is really where I felt the pacing of the remake was stretching out just a bit too far. I think the hospital took me nearly 3 hours in the remake, whereas in the original you could be in and out in about 45 minutes. This is largely due to the remake's abundance of environmental puzzles and the labyrinthian design of the hospital's hallways and corridors. To start off, the remake adds a puzzle right at the beginning to access the basement, where players must count objects in the environment, nurses, doctors, trees, based on paintings in the lobby. We then get the key to the basement, go down, and get the generator running, and then proceed upstairs with Maria. Although Maria is present for slightly different set pieces in the remake as compared to the original, the general time spent with her is about the same. We then get to the scene where Maria rests in one of the hospital rooms.
James. Wait a minute. I'm kind of tired. It's just a hangover.
Maybe you should rest.
Yeah. Okay.
In the original, the atmosphere is heavy with the haunting track playing as Maria stops to rest. In the original, Maria doesn't question James about what he will do if he can't find Mary until James goes back to visit her for the first time, a subtle nod and a gameplay choice that can lead to the Maria ending. Now in the remake, this moment is softened a bit, showcasing Maria's vulnerability. Maria's dialogue is delivered in a quieter manner. The camera framing changes as well as Maria asks James what he will do if he can't find Mary, with James refusing to turn to face Maria. There are two interpretations for this. The first is that seeing Maria in bed reminds James of Mary lying in a hospital bed, which overwhelms James as he can't bear to look at the familiar sight again. The second is that Maria is on the bed with her legs up in a potentially suggestive manner, again reminding James of his repressed desires. In the original, James gets the roof key in this room. However, the remake adds more complexity. James needs to find 3 bracelets to unlock a key in the director's office. These additional puzzles create more layers in the remake, turning what was a simpler progression path in the original into a more extended, lengthier sequence. You find the first bracelet by exploring and eventually falling down a hole in the wall. You then explore the hospital further, eventually leading you to going outside and then to a new pool location which houses the second bracelet. Then, you need to find a moldy X-ray and use mold remover on it so that you can slot it into an X-ray light board, which gives the players the code to unlock a lock to get the third and final bracelet. James then returns to the director's office, places the bracelet according to the numbers found on them to unlock a key to a side room, which houses another puzzle. This puzzle involves rearranging books to get a cipher to solve yet another puzzle on the opposite side of the director's office. Even though I really enjoyed this puzzle and I think its complexity is right on brand for Silent Hill 2, this detour to get the roof key just highlights the stretched out runtime of the hospital section. We are now at the rooftop. The rooftop scene plays out differently between the two versions. In the original, Pyramid Head appears after James wanders the roof aimlessly. The randomness of his appearance, combined with the unsettling silence, heightens the fear through uncertainty. His presence is felt first in gameplay when we catch a glimpse of him as James gets cornered. In the remake, Pyramid Head's entrance is more scripted, tied to reading a suicide letter in the side room and then attempting to walk back out. The scare comes in the form of a more traditional jump scare. This shift in approach reduces the sense of unease built through the original's disoriented presentation and sudden, but brief, panic. Once James gets up, it's a relatively quick trip to Laura's cutscene and the Flesh Lips boss fight. He encounters the padded room with a flashback to the same room in the original. I do wish they would have included this puzzle in the remake, as I've always liked trying to decipher the one in the original, especially when it was A, randomly generated, and B, sometimes hard to read based on the number of options there are for the text. We then get to the cutscene with Laura.
Laura?
Huh? You know my name?
Eddie told me.
That big, fat blabbermouth.
Laura, why do you keep running away from me? And how do you know about Mary?
I just do. What's the big deal?
Why can't you just tell me?
You gonna yell at me if I don't?
No, I won't.
You gonna yell at me if I don't?
No. I won't. Please, just... I need to know.
I was friends with Mary. We met at the hospital. It was last year.
You liar! Laura,
Fine, don't believe me.
But last year, Mary was already... I'm sorry, Laura. Anyway, let's go. We can talk about this later. This is no place for a kid. There are all sorts of strange things around here. I can't believe you haven't even gotten a scratch on you.
Why should I? Mary's my friend. We met at the hospital last year.
Stop lying! Laura, I'm sorry.
Fine, don't believe me. See if I care!
Hey!
Let go!
I'm sorry, Laura, but I can't let you just run around this place. You might get hurt.
Hurt by what?
Look, just stay with me, okay? This is no place for a kid.
Fine.
The key moment in this scene is when Laura claims that she knows Mary from the hospital, saying they met last year. James reacts sharply, calling her a liar. In the original, Laura's response feels slower and more measured before James doubles back and apologizes. In the remake, however, the pacing is much faster. James blurts out, "Stop lying," and almost immediately apologizes before Laura runs away. The remake's version of this scene is a bit more hectic and quick-paced, contrasting with the more subdued tone of the original. In the original, the two make amends right there without any chase, which feels more grounded in comparison. I do appreciate the added dialogue in the remake, particularly when Laura asks, "Hurt by what?" This reinforces she's not experiencing the same reality as James and the others. It's a subtle but effective reminder of the alternate perspectives in Silent Hill. Laura then leads James to a dark room with Flesh Lips under the pretense of having a letter from Mary. In the original, when she calls James a fart face, there's a slight hesitation that makes the insult feel harsher.
Laura?
That nuance is somewhat lost in the remake, where Laura repeats fart face 3 times in quick succession.
In your dreams, fart face.
Please open the door. There's something in here.
Sure there is. A big lying fart face. See a fart face?
Laura!
It feels overdone and loses its impact. Despite that, the desperation James feels as he realizes he's not alone in the room comes across similarly in both versions. James's frustration when he calls Laura a brat is also well done in the remake, retaining the intensity of the original. This scene stands out in both games. One notable change is the way Laura is shown through the window in the remake, whereas in the original her presence is conveyed through the sound of her voice and the heavy use of the Dutch angles. The remake opts for more jump cuts, visually showing Laura outside the door, perhaps to make it clearer to the audience. It's a significant stylistic shift, and Blooper Team seems to have felt the need to drive the point home more directly, which I think is odd. Regardless, we are now at the Flesh Lips fight. The Flesh Lips boss fight offers a great comparison between these two versions. In the original, players are trapped in a small confined space with 2 Flesh Lips enemies hanging from the ceiling, followed by a third. The tight quarters make the fight feel claustrophobic and tense as players navigate the cramped room looking for opportunities to attack. The remake changes this dynamic by having a single Flesh Lips boss with more complex mechanics, allowing for dodging and precision targeting, requiring the players to first shoot its arm, forcing it to fall, and then targeting one side of the monster to remove its metal protection before hitting the monster itself. The fight in the remake also features a second phase where the enemy drops to the ground and moves around more aggressively. The remake's more interactive combat system adds an extra layer to this fight, but some of the tension from the original's tighter, more confined space is lost. After the Flesh Lips battle, James gets grabbed and we get the awesome scene of James falling down or through a hallway as sirens blare, signaling the transition into the Otherworld hospital. Both games excel in atmosphere here, but the remake adds more grotesque visuals to the environment, clearly signaling the shift to the Otherworld, while the original opts for a more subtler transition, blending the boundaries between reality and nightmare more fluidly. In the Otherworld Hospital, the chain box puzzle is the central point for progression in the remake. Players can immediately see the chains leading to different rooms, and each path leads to, guess what? More puzzles. Not that these puzzles are bad, I actually think they are quite well designed, with one requiring players to look at somewhat subtle environmental clues, including looking at how many pills there are in a sink, how many times a light flickers before it resets, and a time on a nearby clock. These puzzles of course come with their own plethora of combat encounters to accompany them, most of which are unavoidable and tedious. I hope this part of the analysis conveys what I was feeling my first playthrough. Tired of the hospital at this point. The hospital is a great section in both the remake and the original, but its padded out time here in the remake does seriously border on too long. It feels like this is where Blooper Team started development, and they wanted this section to be as complex as possible, highlighting all of the interesting things that they were doing with the gameplay, before dialing things back as they progressed. Almost like how this comparative analysis was a lot more in depth at the beginning of this section compared to now, compared to even where it's going. We unlock the chained box, which triggers the painted lady door to appear, and we can then go to the basement. While in the elevator, we get the infamous trick-or-treat puzzle. Of note is that James is alone here, whereas in the original, this scene takes place when Maria was already with James. I liked her inclusion, as it made it even stranger knowing that someone else was hearing this too.
What was that?
The trick-or-treat puzzle in the elevator also differs. In the remake, the trivia questions are slightly altered, asking about Walter Sullivan's victims, as opposed to his own name, the number of plague deaths, and street names. While this adds complexity, especially for returning fans thinking it would be easy, it feels somewhat disconnected from the immediate narrative. In the original, the trivia felt more intuitive, with questions tied directly to locations and events players would be traveling to next on their journey. While I can appreciate the switch up in questions, I think the number of deaths one is kind of stupid. This is information that you received in a memo right by where you first met Maria, about 3 to 4 in-game hours at this point. So expecting players to comb back through their collected memos or somehow remember that number when they have been reading memos all game is pretty far-fetched. Granted, the reward for completing this puzzle is pretty sizable cache of resources, so maybe this was Blooper Team's way of making the challenge on par with the reward. We then rendezvous with Maria.
James!
Mary? Oh, Maria. It's you. I thought you were... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I've never been so scared in my whole life. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
Maria's reappearance in the hospital brings further contrast. In the original, her frustration towards James for leaving her behind is palpable, her anger and intensity reinforcing her growing attachment. The remake tones down her anger, making her confrontation softer and more empathetic.
James!
Mary! Oh. Maria, I thought... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? I was almost killed back there. I have never been so scared in my whole life. All you care about is that dead wife of yours. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
This shift mirrors the remake's overall portrayal of Maria as more nurturing and less manipulative. Additionally, the refrigerator puzzle, where Maria teases James about his masculinity in the original, becomes less aggressive in the remake.
You can't open it?
Yeah, Maria, give me a hand here.
Come on. You're supposed to be the big man around here. How's a little girl like me supposed to help?
Having trouble there?
Yeah. You think you could give me a hand?
Me? You're supposed to be the big man around here. How's a little girl like me supposed to help?
Here, Maria's teasing is more playful, keeping the flirtation intact but lowering tension. Also of note is that in the original you can go in the refrigerator room before regrouping with Maria, allowing players to realize to come back here with somebody else. A more natural way of progression rather than the linear version we see in the remake. We get the last ring and proceed to the painted lady puzzle.
What's wrong? I thought you wanted to get out of here.
I know. It's just... something doesn't feel right.
The remake introduces a new cutscene here, where Maria expresses hesitation about continuing, foreshadowing the danger ahead. In the original, this encounter comes as a surprise with no warning before the sudden Pyramid Head chase scene. The remake's telegraphed danger reduces almost all of the shock value of the chase scene, and I truly think Blooper Team kind of messed up by adding it here. Sure, insert time loop theory about how Maria's seemingly aware of what happens next, but I mean seriously, for first time players this cutscene is probably the first instance where the tone in the remake actively goes against the original. In almost every other case there are differences, sure, but those have all kept the tone of the original intact without sacrificing the narrative. No excuse, honestly. We get to the chase scene with Pyramid Head, and this is a sequence where I think the over-the-shoulder perspective hurts the remake. In the original, the fixed cameras of the scene made it incredibly tense, with brief glimpses of Pyramid Head chasing you followed by long extended hallways where you could see the entire chase from out in front of James. By contrast, in the remake, this amount of holding forward while watching Maria run in front of James before she seemingly falls way behind them as the two reach the elevator? What? We hardly even see Pyramid Head unless we make a deliberate attempt to turn around, which slows down James's movement speed. Honestly, Blooper Team kind of botched this last bit in the hospital, but don't worry, we won't have to see anything this egregious again. In both versions, Maria's death at Pyramid Head's hands is tragic and emotionally charged. In the original, James's collapse afterwards feels more tragic as he's facing away from the door, before the door opens up in all seemingly one take. The remake softens this impact by again cutting to black here. I know this last bit was pretty negative, but believe me, this is pretty much the one time in the game I was feeling fatigued. I think the hospital sequence went on way too long, especially for a first playthrough. Compared to the stellar pacing of the original, it was a slog to get through. Luckily, we got some absolute banger parts ahead, so stick with me. After leaving the hospital and following Laura's path, the journey takes on a slightly different feel between the original and the remake. In the original, by this point, players already know where to find the wrench based on a note found in the hospital. However, in the remake, this information isn't revealed until James reaches the mobile home on his journey back. Both versions take James through the familiar graded floor path with the ceiling clingers, and the tension remains just as palpable in the remake as it is in the original. But while the original features a long, mostly empty stretch leading up to the wrench, the remake turns this area into a more linear, combat-heavy section. Players must traverse through several zones fighting enemies. These enemies can be easily skipped in the original, while in the remake, the tight locations, such as the diner and narrow alleyways, make this a lot tougher. This shift reflects the remake's common theme of increased combat and enemy encounters, altering the pacing of exploration. One notable difference occurs when we finally reach the wrench. In the original, the wrench and letter are simply sitting on a porch, easy to find and distinguishable by the changing camera. In the remake, a phone booth rings as you pass by, and when you answer it, no one is on the other end. You receive the wrench at the end of this short scene. This small change seems designed to create a clearer, more noticeable landmark, preventing players from missing the wrench's location. While it adds a bit of mystery, it also feels like a more guided experience compared to the original, where you had to keep an eye on your map. After obtaining the wrench, you return to Rosewater Park to retrieve the key to the Historical Society. In the remake, a significant addition is made here with an entirely new cutscene featuring Angela at the statue. While extra cutscenes with Maria can sometimes feel unnecessary, as we've discussed, this one with Angela offers additional character development, and again reinforces my opinion that Angela's voice actor, Gianna Keel, did an excellent job.
Anyway, I'm happy to see you.
Happy to see me?
Alive, I mean.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't happen to see a little girl around here, did you?
A little girl?
Yeah, Angela? Are you all right? Angela?
No. Please. You shouldn't be here.
Angela, it's okay.
No, don't touch me!
This additional scene adds depth to her character, similar to Eddie in the theater. During this scene, James expresses happiness at seeing Angela, which triggers her trauma related to her father. Angela believes that James, like all men, is only after one thing, and her reaction is fascinating. She projects her traumatic experiences of abuse onto James, interpreting his intentions in a sinister light. When James asks her if she's seen a yet little girl, Angela immediately recoils, assuming James wants to harm this girl the same way that she was abused by her father. This additional cutscene brilliantly reinforces Angela's backstory and sets up a powerful moment in the Labyrinth later. It's a standout scene and one of the remake's strongest additions in terms of storytelling. Finally, James makes his way to the Silent Hill Historical Society. What I appreciated in the remake is the decision to keep this section devoid of enemies. After the combat-heavy hospital sequence and the tense journey through the streets, this enemy-free stretch feels like a welcome relief. Players can solve the carjack puzzle now without the constant threat of enemies. In the original, this same journey to the Historical Society still includes enemies, which, in hindsight, can feel somewhat forced given the weight of what James just endured. The remake's decision to remove them here enhances the pacing, giving the player a much-needed breather after a series of intense encounters. The Historical Society is nearly identical in both the original and the remake. I was curious about the amount of time it takes to get down the endless staircase to see how the two compared. What's absolutely awesome is that the two are basically just as long. In the original, it takes about 50 seconds of continuous running to reach the bottom, while in the remake, it's slightly over a minute. It's great to see Blooper Team maintain this oppressive descent, preserving the atmosphere of dread. They could have easily shortened the time, but their decision to keep it almost identical shows their care for the tone this staircase sets, as James, and by extension the player, enters the depth of James's journey. After navigating a few hallways, we jump down the first of many holes, ending up at the bottom of a well. In the original, you had to interact with different sections on the wall until you noticed one that felt off, prompting you to destroy it. In the remake, there are 4 clearly marked white-painted walls to destroy, and you simply guess until you find the correct one. While this makes sense given how breakable walls were presented and used throughout the game, I prefer the original's less obvious design. It added to the feeling of helplessness as you fumbled your way out. I think the remake telegraphs the solution too much as opposed to the original. Now we arrive at one of the most terrifying rooms from the original. After grabbing the key for the next hole, the door locks and your flashlight goes out. You need to replace the battery on your flashlight with the one you found in the hospital, and when you exit the menu, you see the beetles and bugs crawling all around you as you frantically try to input the right code to escape. In the remake, there's no extra battery. The room simply goes dark after you pick up the key, triggering the bug infestation. The remake introduces a different kind of tension here, one that I don't find compelling when compared to the original. The puzzle takes place in real time, and while you're trying to solve the keypad, infinitely respawning beetles continuously attack you. This change adds pressure as you have to fight off bugs to buy a few seconds for another attempt at the code. While I understand the need for a threat to create urgency, it changes the focus. In the original, the fear came from being trapped in a confined, bug-infested room. You wanted to get out for the sake of escaping, not to mitigate damage. In contrast, the remake shifts the priority to bug killing instead of solving the puzzle. It can be frustrating to try a couple codes only to get attacked out of the keypad screen, which forces you to then go and kill 3 beetles to try again before they respawn. The original simplicity worked much better. After escaping, you jump down another hole leading to the second to last encounter with Eddie. This scene is chilling in both versions, and the remake retains the same haunting tone. The acting is excellent, particularly in the iconic line about not killing someone just because of how they looked at you.
You can't just kill someone because of the way they looked at you.
In the remake, James pushes Eddie more with questions about feeling threatened, which corners Eddie into admitting he killed someone just for how they looked at him before quickly backing off and saying it was a joke. I appreciate how Blooper Team used updated motion capture and facial expressions to amplify the tension and creepiness in this moment, enhancing what was already an unsettling scene. The prison section is significantly different between the original and the remake, especially in terms of length. In the original, this area could be completed in about 15 to 20 minutes, while I spent well over an hour in the remake. This reflects the overall pacing between the two games, with the remake adding about 3/4 more content to each section. Therefore, I'm not going to go as in-depth here. In the original, the prison sequence is fairly straightforward. You collect 3 stone tablets for the execution puzzle in the yard, then gather a wax figure, a horseshoe, and a lighter before progressing down and finishing the labyrinth. The remake, however, stretches this section out, but unlike earlier extended sections, this feels well-paced and doesn't overstay its welcome. One of the highlights is the weight puzzle, where configuring weights on different scales unlocks various doors. This puzzle leads to multiple areas of the prison with respawning mannequins forcing you to be quick and deliberate in the hub areas as you move between rooms. I particularly enjoyed the inclusion of the demonic voice in the book room. Which genuinely terrified me on my first playthrough. Another standout moment is in the shower area, when you encounter enemies lying on the floor clearly waiting to come alive. After retrieving the weight from a hole in the wall, you have to dodge and weave past these now active enemies as you rush back to the safety of the hub. A tense and thrilling sequence that was predictable, but still incredibly fun. I like most of these sections here because, unlike the rest of the game, a lot of these combat encounters do feel like they can be avoided with careful movement. The remake also brings back the terrifying bathroom secrets with the loud knocking, a welcome callback and one that made me shit my pants. However, I do miss the puzzle from the original where you have to combine the wax figure, horseshoe, and lighter to make a handle for a cellar door. It was a clever moment where you wouldn't initially think to combine these items, but once you see the slot, it makes sense and feels like a stroke of genius on James's part. Overall, the prison in the remake is where the game genuinely hooked me. After completing this section, it was hard to put the game down. The deeper James descends into the nightmare, the more the player is drawn into his subconscious. The prison's design with its sprawling sections serve as a metaphor for James's mental state. He felt trapped, cornered, and burdened by a life sentence of caring for someone who can no longer fulfill his desires. The symbolism here is powerful, and the hangman puzzle at the end only adds to it. Speaking of the hangman puzzle, it's handled differently in the remake. The puzzle appears at the end of the prison section, whereas it's saved for the end of the labyrinth in the original. In the remake, the puzzle retains the interpretive tone of the original about who is justified in their actions. In the original, on easy puzzle difficulty, the correct answer is the kidnapper who turns out to be the father of the person he kidnapped. On normal difficulty, it's the arsonist, as the town couldn't find the culprit and arrested a random newcomer. Solving this puzzle in the original felt incredibly satisfying, and while I appreciated the remake's attempt, it doesn't quite reach the same level of depth. Regardless, we are now ready to enter the labyrinth. The labyrinth is brief in the original, but the remake expands it significantly. What a surprise. The maze-like design in the remake truly feels labyrinthian, though it stretches on a bit longer than necessary. One major change is that the abstract daddy fight occurs right at the start in the remake, whereas it's saved for later in the original. I like how this fight plays out in the remake, particularly the way it chases you through a vision of Angela's childhood home, with TVs emitting the distorted sound of her father's voice. The increased combat complexity in the remake enhances the fight. However, I do miss the original's grotesque environment of fleshy pistons in the walls, symbolizing Angela's abuse. This detail is still present in the remake, but it's less emphasized, replaced by more scenes of Angela's home and hiding spots from her father. In the original, this boss marks the end of the labyrinth, but before moving on, we need to discuss the pivotal scene, the reappearance of Maria.
Maria? Maria! I thought that thing killed you. Are you hurt? Are you hurt bad?
Not at all, silly.
After you thought she died in the hospital. This moment is iconic. In the original, Maria's lines,
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else?
James? Honey? Did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else?
is chilling. It's a perfect turning point where the player starts questioning everything. Maria's words make you doubt her, the situation, and even your own perception. The tone is ominous and surreal, capturing the ethereal storytelling that defines Silent Hill 2. The remake nails the framing of this scene. The ambiguity of which character is truly behind bars adds an unsettling atmosphere. Maria's delivery of certain lines certainly carries a different tone when compared to the original.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So, you're Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
but it's not a stylistic difference which I think detracts from the scene in the remake. If you re-enter the room, there's no additional dialogue, just an eerie humming of Maria's theme, creating a chilling, atmospheric touch. The Labyrinth is longer in the remake, and while I won't cover every area, a couple of things stand out. I'm glad they kept the room where Pyramid Head roams. In the original, this is one of the scariest sections, and seeing it in the remake terrified me. However, I was disappointed that you don't find the Great Knife as a usable weapon in the remake. In the original, the Great Knife is a powerful weapon, though it comes with a long wind-up time, making it a cool but risky option. In the remake, it's reduced to a puzzle item, which feels underwhelming. All you get is an achievement for finding the same room as the original. It's a letdown compared to the original's reward of a new melee weapon. Another highlight in the remake is seeing Pyramid Head as you approach the Labyrinth's exit. This moment freaked me out, adding an unexpected scare as you progress. After finishing the Labyrinth, we come to the graveyard. There isn't much difference between the two versions, so I won't go into detail, but I think Blooper Team did a good job preserving this moment, as it's pretty iconic for me. Next we encounter the Eddie boss fight. The emotion in Eddie's voice in the remake is visceral, especially when he shoots the corpse and says,
"And a corpse can't laugh!"
This adds context to his frustration and brutality. A notable difference is how Eddie reacts. In the original, Eddie tries to walk away until James calls him nuts.
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
I knew it. You too. You're just like him, James.
Hey, I didn't mean anything.
Which prompts Eddie to snap. In the remake, Eddie preempts this by assuming James's ill intentions, adding a new dynamic.
You want to talk down to me some more? Tell me to relax? You're just like the rest of them, James.
No, I don't want...
Shut up!
I do miss the original's sharp soundtrack with Eddie's villainous nature, especially the sharp chimes that highlight his descent into madness. In the remake, the first phase of the fight, where you shoot Eddie until he moves to the next room, is replaced by a cutscene. The actual fight is tense and atmospheric. The room is so dark you can barely see Eddie, forcing you to rely on sound to dodge and counterattack. As the fight progresses, the meat on the hooks begins to move, further disorientating you. I think the remake improves on the original in terms of tension and immersion. One unique change in the remake is that Eddie's dialogue about killing the dog happens during gameplay rather than in a cutscene, as it was in the original. This adds tension as you don't know where Eddie is while he's talking, making the scene even more unnerving. At the end of the fight, James reflects on killing another human. In the original, he says outright that he's never killed a human before. The remake handles this more subtly, showing James staring at his hands in disgust, as if grappling with how far he's fallen. This silent moment of self-realization works well and adds depth to James's character. After the processing area, we paddle a rowboat to Lakeview Hotel. There aren't many differences here, but the atmosphere is equally great in both versions, forcing you to reflect on what's ahead. A small change in the remake is the more straightforward path to the light, where you can just basically row in a straight line. In the original, this required more navigation.
This place hasn't changed at all in 3 years.
Upon arriving at the hotel, the remake sets the tone with a much more brighter interpretation of it. In the original, once you got inside, it was relatively dark like all of the other indoor environments. In the remake, the main lobby areas are all backlit, which serves as a welcome contrast to the dark and dreary journey it took to get here. In both versions, you collect the note to James and the room 312 key behind the reception area. We then get to the standout scene in the restaurant where Laura hides behind the piano. The remake softens the music, creating a subtler tone compared to the original's eerie yet mesmerizing melody, which plays as you read through Mary's letter. The remake also creates another tonal difference here, as Mary's voice actor actually reads the letter in a cutscene rather than the on-screen text in the original.
My dearest Laura, I'm leaving this letter with Rachel to give to you after I'm gone.
While this change reduces player agency, it creates a more cinematic experience. Gameplay in both versions revolves around finding the 3 music boxes and the VHS tape. The original introduces a unique enemy in the hotel, resembling the abstract daddy, but it feels very much out of place, especially this late in the game. In contrast, the remake adds more rooms to explore, expanding the hotel's size and requiring players to unlock different sections. There's a new puzzle involving books, which leads to a more complex solution for opening a locked suitcase. Instead of using thinner to reveal the code like in the original, the remake introduces red paint and a light bulb combination to see the password. There's also a new boss with one of the ceiling clingers from earlier. This is what I interpret as Blooper Team's interpretation as the odd, abstract daddy enemy, and I think it's a great addition. For the most part, you have been avoiding these enemies all game long, and now it presents a great opportunity for you to take one on head to head. The boss fight itself is pretty basic, as it doesn't have a lot of health, but dodging its attacks in between yours is still fun. We keep exploring the hotel, collecting music boxes until we need to go to the employee elevator and head down to the basement. The remake streamlines this process of putting your items away by allowing you to deposit entire categories of items at once, which is also a nice touch to show how much you've gathered up to this point. The original required manually moving each item, which was very tedious. The remake also tones down the ear-piercing weight limit alarm, making the experience less jarring. There's a major difference in this section in the basement. In the original, you more or less just ran around until you found everything you needed to progress. In the remake, Blooper Team took the opportunity to create a tense stealth section while you were unarmed and vulnerable. Once you get the final music box, you're ready to solve the music puzzle. I also want to note that I love how you can visually see the hotel getting more and more dilapidated as you progress. Paintings fall out of their frames and the wallpaper begins to sag. A great touch as James gets closer to finding out the truth. Back to the music box puzzle, the remake enhances this puzzle by adding a layer of difficulty. Instead of simply placing each princess according to their description like in the original, you must align paths and turn each key a set number of times. The first part of this puzzle was tough for me to figure out, but I like the second section as it required some careful thought. This extra step makes the puzzle more challenging and engaging. Finally, you reach room 312, where the culmination of James's journey awaits. We reach the penultimate scene, the VHS tape. In the remake, there's an added shot of James's reflection in the TV, showcasing the bags under his eyes and his deep, desperate stare into the television. This visual emphasizes his exhaustion after being awake for over 24 hours and is a great touch. While the remake includes music during the tape's beginning, the original relies on silence, creating a hauntingly tense atmosphere.
Are you taping again? Are you taping again? Come on.
The moment when James kills Mary differs slightly between the two versions. In the original, James grabs the pillow from underneath Mary's head, whereas in the remake, he enters the scene with a pillow in hand. This slight change makes the act feel more deliberate in the remake. There's also a quick cut showing Mary's hand with her wedding band visible, adding another emotional layer to the scene. After the tape ends, the remake cuts back to James's reflection on the TV, now with his head hung in grief. His expression in the remake conveys deeper sadness and guilt compared to the original, where he reacts with a more guilty anger when telling Laura that he killed Mary.
No, I killed her.
Laura's response in the remake is also more emotional, expressing anger and bargaining with James, asking him to give Mary back. This adds depth to Laura's grief. Entering the other world is a clear distinction in the remake as compared to the original, where we don't even know the hotel has changed until we leave the room. When we enter the Otherworld Hotel, the original presents a labyrinth of rooms symbolizing James's lost mental state as he searches for an escape. The transitions between rooms are seamless, further enhancing this maze-like experience. In contrast, the remake opts for a more linear progression path through the decayed hotel, given that the remake does not have the same benefit of having loading screens in between each room. One neat addition in the remake is a note with the message, "There is no healing of thy bruise, thy wound is grievous," reflecting James's pain and setting up potential interpretations for the upcoming endings. There's also a Bible verse and a recording from the hospital director, all adding to the emotional weight of this final level. As we continue through the Otherworld, we encounter non-hostile versions of the enemies James has been fighting, symbolizing his realization of what these monsters represent. The remake makes this more apparent, showing the creatures shriveled and inactive, whereas the original leaves it more ambiguous. I tried to see if they were non-hostile in the original, but I couldn't tell with the murky water in the basement. We then arrive at our last encounter with Angela. The remake tones down the music until Angela recognizes James, giving this moment more impact. A key missing line in the remake is when James says,
"Me? No, I'd never kill myself,"
which I think added depth in the original. Even though the player could have very well been on their way to get the in-water ending in the original, I still like this line's inclusion because it showed James's delusion. However, I understand Blooper Team not including it. The remake handles Angela's exit beautifully, with James quietly giving up on her, leaving the room in a cutscene as opposed to regaining control as in the original. Next we arrive at the 9 red squares, the last save point. In a clever touch, James avoids looking directly at them, showcasing his growing reluctance to whatever it is they represent, which is a neat detail considering how entranced James has been by them up until this point. This is a cool detail reflecting his internal struggle. We then move on to the dual pyramid head fight. This is my absolute favorite boss fight in this game and potentially in survival horror games in general. I also love the addition of James's barbaric yell in the remake, symbolizing the breaking point in his journey. In terms of the soundtrack, this one absolutely slaps. It is both ominous and also revengeful. It's an absolutely epic finale to Pyramid Head's appearance in Silent Hill 2. In terms of gameplay, in the original, the room was large enough that it made outmaneuvering these two relatively easy, but it's still an absolutely epic fight in both versions. In the remake, the stakes are higher with a faster paced battle and more varied moves, while the room around you collapses as the fight progresses. The combat is more engaging. I especially love when the two attack you at the same time and their spears sync up while you dodge out of the way. The addition of allowing one to throw a spear and then have to go and retrieve it adds extra elements to an already amazing fight. You defeat them and the pyramid heads impale themselves, a great detail. The hallway scene leading to the final boss is timed perfectly in the remake, where Mary's voice pleads you to wait right as you get to the end, creating a powerful moment as you either choose to linger or move forward. This slight shift adds emotional weight as you reflect on Mary's words before entering the final door. In the original, we also hear James's side of the conversation, again reinforcing us as a third-party observer. In the remake, all we hear is Mary. This reinforces the remake's emphasis on James's personal journey. We then get to the ending. Because of how the pre-final boss scene plays out differently depending on the ending you get, I will discuss them when we get to the endings in the next section. Now we can go ahead and talk about the final boss itself. In the original, the final boss fight is fairly anticlimactic. You battle a flying, deformed figure resembling Mary and Maria, avoiding bugs and taking shots at the boss. The fight is simple and quick, especially if you have stockpiled rifle ammo. There isn't much depth to the fight, it's much more about avoiding bugs, shooting the boss, and repeating the process. The remake, however, gives the fight much more complexity, with 3 phases. The first phase mirrors the original where you dodge bugs and shoot the boss. Timing the dodge against the glowing bugs adds some challenge, but the overall mechanics are familiar. By the time you've mastered the combat, it becomes a test to see how well you've adapted to the game's systems. After the first phase, the floor collapses and you enter a dark circular room. This second phase feels much more intense as the boss descends from the ceiling, similar to the Flesh Lips fight. The dark room adds a level of uncertainty as it's harder to predict where the boss will strike. There's plenty of ammo around to keep you stocked for the next phase. In the third and final phase, the room shifts again, with this time being a slightly collapsed version of the first phase's location. The boss moves on 4 legs, mimicking the spider-like movements from the Flesh Lips second phase. Its melee attacks have interesting timing, with long reach that often catches you off guard. Dodging these attacks is satisfying, especially as you get the rhythm down. The bugs are still present, adding an extra layer of challenge. The fight ends with a powerful moment. After defeating her, you're forced to put the final shot into the boss as she calls out James's name. It's a fittingly engaging final battle, but in terms of impact, the dual pyramid head fight still stands out as the more symbolic and meaningful encounter. With the boss defeated, we move on to the endings, which I'll dive into next. For the Leave ending, the final scene begins with Mary standing by the window. James's expression after she says they could be together forever is brilliantly acted, showing his brief happiness turning to sadness as he realizes she's just an illusion. He momentarily collapses into this false understanding but quickly snaps back to reality, and the way his lips tremble as Maria pleads her case is heartbreaking. He knows he has to cut ties with Maria as Mary. A powerful and emotional moment. In the original, Maria is much more sinister, scolding James immediately for mistaking her for Mary, before pleading with him to accept her. The remake opts for a more subtle approach, with Maria gently trying to persuade James. The shift fits Maria's softer attitude throughout the remake and adds depth to the manipulation. After the boss fight, we see James and Mary in the bedroom. James tries to explain that he couldn't watch Mary suffer, but then admits he was frustrated and tired. Mary's line,
If that's true, then why do you look so sad?
is devastating and thought-provoking, highlighting James's internal conflict. He didn't truly want her dead, and his journey through Silent Hill reflects this regret. The ending shows James coming to terms with this decision. In both versions, Mary reads her letter. The original keeps the letter reading over a still shot of the graveyard, which focuses all of the attention on the letter's emotional weight. The remake replaces this with a montage of Silent Hill locations, shifting focus from the letter itself, which lessens its impact just slightly. Still, it's a stylistic choice that isn't too disruptive. The remake's voice actor for Mary delivers a strong performance, getting choked up during the letter. However, a key line is omitted.
I can't tell you to remember me. But I can't bear for you to forget me.
This omission is notable as it captures Mary's conflicted emotions and their complex relationship. The remake instead focuses on Mary asking James to remember her for who she was, not the person the illness made her, which still works well but misses some of the original's depth. We are now at the Maria ending. At the top of the warehouse, Mary sits on the bed and her performance shines in this ending. She confronts James and scolds him for her death. Her sadness and regret over her illness is palpable, especially when she directly questions whether Maria can provide what he needs. It's worth noting that in the original, she specifically calls out Maria, while the remake opts for a subtler approach, consistent with its overall tone. In the remake, Maria is lying down at Heaven's Night when James arrives and takes her hand, reinforcing the original's message. After taking the letter from Maria and placing it in his jacket, they depart. Blooper Team's decision not to include Mary's reading of the letter in this ending is brilliant. It emphasizes James's indifference as long as he has Maria. As they head to the car, James mentions Maria's cough.
Better do something about that cough.
His cold demeanor in this moment serves as a powerful bookend, highlighting James's surrender to the temptations of Silent Hill. The in-water ending is one that I find deeply depressing. In the remake, the scene starts in the car, omitting the bedroom entirely. James confesses that he can't forgive himself for what he's done and acknowledges that it's not what Mary would want, but it no longer matters because she's dead. He glances back in the rearview mirror, almost speaking to Mary's corpse in the backseat. His expression as he turns to take one last look at her body before starting the car are brilliantly acted and profoundly sad. I love how the rebirth ending recontextualizes the entire journey on a New Game Plus cycle. Instead of seeking repentance, James is on a mission to erase his sins by channeling the old gods of Silent Hill to perform a ritual to bring Mary back. It's haunting. We see James and Maria before the final boss fight, where he ominously claims he can bring Mary back, creating an eerie and ethereal tone.
I can still bring her back.
What? No, that's not true.
But before I do, I need to kill that part of me that still clings to you.
In the original, he doesn't mention resurrecting Mary, but in the remake, he confronts Maria and directly states his intentions, prompting an angered response from her. James revealed he must kill the part of himself that still clings to Maria, which triggers the boss fight. This dark and moody atmosphere is captured perfectly in the remake. Next, we see James paddling out to an island while speaking to Mary about how the old gods still grant power to those who venerate them. While there isn't much difference from the original, both versions evoke an equally haunting atmosphere. Now, let's lighten the mood and discuss the two joke endings. The first is the UFO ending, which requires James to activate a crystal at specific points in the game. When he reaches room 312, he can use the crystal one last time and be abducted by aliens. In the original, James encounters Harry, the protagonist from Silent Hill 1. They question each other about the missing persons they are searching for before being whisked away by the aliens. In the remake, instead of Harry, James converses with the 2001 version of himself, referred to as Space James. I appreciate that they brought back the original character model and maintained the retro TV appearance of the cutscene. Space James still gives a thumbs up to the camera as the new James departs with the aliens. We then see 2001 James say Mary's name and appear in front of the Lakeview Hotel, suggesting he has switched places with the new James in his endless hunt for Mary. It's a neat additional detail, but it lacks the callback to Silent Hill 1. In the dog ending, we discover that a Shiba Inu was behind everything in the game. James speaks Japanese to the dog, which is a nice nod considering Team Silent's Japanese origin. In the remake, there are two parts to the key to discover, but the outcome remains the same. James's actor speaks broken Polish in reference to Blooper Team being Polish.
Fucka shit.
Which adds a nice touch and is well deserved considering all the work they did with this remake. Now that we've covered these two endings, let's discuss the two entirely new endings added by Blooper Team. First, we have the Bliss ending. In this ending, we need to obtain an item called White Claudia, found by unlocking a safe in the bowling alley and using that key to access a box in the outdoor section of the hospital. The item's description reads, "This will make it all right. For a special time, a special place. James must consume this beverage before starting the VHS tape." This ending presents an alternate version of the VHS tape where James becomes transfixed, allowing him and Mary to live happily within the confines of the VHS, a moment of pure joy for them both. The drink, likely lethal, enables James to return to this moment of eternal happiness. He sets down the camera and promises Mary he will take her back to that special place. When he picks up the camera again, he realizes that this isn't reality, leaving him confused and saddened. However, he dismisses this realization and continues on. We then see an empty room 312 with James no longer present. It's a compelling ending that explores James's desire to return to a happier past. I appreciate his subtle expression of awareness that something isn't right, contrasted with his carefree disregard for that reality in favor of living the life he wanted to with Mary. Now, let's move on to the stillness ending. For the stillness ending, you must first obtain the in-water ending, where James, unable to bear the weight of his actions, takes his own life. In this version, Mary speaks to James from the backseat of his car, confirming her presence there. She consoles him one last time as he quivers and begins to cry, expressing how much he misses her. This ending resonates deeply with me and serves as an even more depressing take on the in-water ending. James asks Mary if she will wait for him, which choked me up. He takes a final glance at the letter in the passenger seat before starting the car and crashing it. I'm so glad Blooper Team added this ending. It's by far the saddest and provides a fitting conclusion to Silent Hill 2. Thanks for watching.